The Outcast and the Explorer. The crystalline spires of Vexar Station gleamed against the backdrop of twin nebulae, their surfaces refracting starlight in hypnotic patterns. Inside the station's diplomatic wing, Naira stood alone at the observation deck, her silver-flecked skin dimly glowing in the artificial twilight. Unlike the other Vexari moving through the corridors with perfect synchronization, Naira walked with an independent rhythm, her movements distinctly her own. She pressed a six-fingered hand against the transparent barrier separating her from the vacuum of space. 28 cycles of life, and still nothing but silence in her mind. No harmonious chorus of collective thought, no gentle current of shared emotions that connected every Vexari consciousness across the galaxy. Nothing but solitude in a society built on perfect mental unity. Ambassador Nira, came a voice from behind her. Tival, her assistant, stood with eyes averted. Unlike other Vexari officials who communicated primarily through telepathic links, Teval had been specially trained to use verbal speech for Naira's benefit, a special accommodation for the neurologically incomplete ambassador. The human delegation has arrived. Station Director Kelvin requests your presence in the reception chamber. Naira nodded, smoothing the iridescent fabric of her formal vestments. Did he say anything else? She asked, already knowing the answer. No, Ambassador. Tival's posture shifted slightly, a reaction to something transmitted across the mental network Naira couldn't access. The reception chamber fell silent as Naira entered. 7 high officials stood in formation around Station Director Kelvin, whose stern face showed no recognition of her approach. Only the subtle shimmer beneath his silver-speckled skin, shifting from calm blue to a troubled purple, betrayed any emotion at all. Ambassador, he said simply, using spoken language in what Naira recognized as a deliberate slight. Among Vexari, verbal communication was considered primitive, used only when necessary with outsiders or, in her case, the neurologically divergent. Naira bowed formally. Director, I understand the human delegation has arrived. Yes, Director Kelvan continued. Dr. Elijah Carter, Earth's scientific envoy. This is his first contact with our species, and given your familiarity with verbal communication, you will serve as his liaison. What remained unspoken but clearly understood was that Naira was considered ideal for this position precisely because her brain lacked the neural structures for telepathic connection, the same structures that defined Vexari identity. Her defect made her suitable for dealing with a similarly limited species. The chamber doors parted, and a human male entered. Dr. Elijah Carter was tall for his species, with brown skin and dark curly hair cut close to his scalp. His eyes, a warm amber color Naira had never seen in a Vexari, moved across the assembled officials before settling on her. Welcome to Vexar Station, Dr. Carter, Naira said in the human language of English, a skill she had mastered during her isolation. I am Ambassador Nira, assigned to facilitate your research mission. The human's expression shifted into what Naira recognized from her studies as a smile. Ambassador, the pleasure is mine. Your command of English is remarkable. Languages are a special interest of mine, she replied, noticing how the other Vexari had already begun to disengage, their mental conversation excluding both her and the human completely. As Naira guided Dr. Carter through the curved corridors of Vexar Station toward his quarters, she observed his reactions carefully. Humans were physically expressive in ways Vexari were not, and Elijah Carter particularly so. His eyes widened at the sight of the station's central atrium, with its towering bioluminescent trees and cascading water features. This is extraordinary, he said. The integration of biological and technological systems is far beyond anything we've achieved on Earth. The station is a living entity in many ways, Nira explained. It responds to the collective consciousness of the Vexari inhabitants. The vegetation, the atmospheric conditions, even the lighting adjust to collective need. Elijah glanced at her. Then how does it respond to you? The question caught Nira off guard. Few ever acknowledged her separation from the collective so directly. It doesn't, she admitted. I remain outside its awareness. I see. Something in his tone made Naira look at him more closely. Not pity, as she had feared, but genuine curiosity. And that's why you've been assigned to me? Because we're both outside the collective? Yes, Naira said, appreciating his directness. The Vexari Imperium believes I am uniquely qualified to interface with non-telepathic species. Lucky me, Elijah replied with another smile that seemed to convey more than simple politeness. The humans' quarters had been prepared according to the specifications sent ahead by Earth's diplomatic corps, environmental settings adjusted to Earth standard gravity and atmosphere, furnishings modeled after human preferences. As the door slid open, the station's AI announced, environmental parameters set to Earth normal, 1G gravity, 20.9% oxygen, 78.1% nitrogen, temperature, 22 degrees Celsius. I've taken the liberty of adding some materials I thought might interest you, Naira said, gesturing to a data terminal. Historical records of Vexari human relations and some cultural contexts that might not be included in your official briefings. Elijah raised an eyebrow. Unofficial information? That's generous of you. Let's call it a perspective not typically included in imperial narratives, Naira replied carefully. Over the following days, Naira found herself spending more time with Elijah than protocol strictly required. His research mission, studying Vexari, neural biology for potential medical applications on Earth, provided a legitimate reason for their extended interactions. But there was something more developing between them. A connection that, ironically, Naira found easier to form than any she'd attempted with her own people. So the entire Vexari civilization functions as a type of neural network? Elijah asked as they sat in his laboratory, examining brain scan data. More like a quantum-entangled consciousness, Naira corrected, studying the comparative brain scans displayed on the holographic projection. Distance doesn't affect the connection. A Vexari on the homeworld can instantaneously communicate with one on the farthest colony. Except you, Elijah said softly. Naira's skin dimmed slightly at his observation. Yes. I was born without the specialized neural structures that enable telepathic communication. In Vexari society, this is considered a severe abnormality. Yet, they made you an ambassador. A convenient placement for an inconvenient member of society, Naira replied with a bitterness she rarely allowed herself to express. I am of noble birth, which complicates matters. They cannot simply discard me, so they found a use for my unique perspective. Elijah looked thoughtful. Among humans, neurological differences are increasingly understood as variations rather than defects. Many of our greatest innovators throughout history had minds that worked differently from the norm. A luxury of a non-telepathic species, Naira said. When your entire civilization depends on mental connection, those who cannot connect become isolated, Elijah finished for her. I'm beginning to understand why you've taken such an interest in human culture. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the station's communication system. Ambassador Naira, came Director Kelvin's voice, strained in a way she had never heard before. Your presence is required in Central Operations immediately. In the Operations Center, chaos reigned, something Naira had never witnessed among the typically synchronized Vexari. Officials moved in disjointed patterns, their skin fluctuating through distress colors. What's happening? Naira asked, with Elijah close behind her. Director Kelvin turned to them, his skin pulsing erratically. We've received reports from the homeworld and 3 colony worlds. There's an outbreak, some kind of neural disruption affecting the collective consciousness. Telepathic connections are degrading across major population centers. What kind of disruption? Elijah asked, professional interest overriding diplomatic protocol. It appears to be targeting the specific neural pathways that enable our telepathic connectivity, a medical officer explained, displaying brain scans on the central monitor. Affected individuals experience progressive disconnection from the collective, followed by severe neurological symptoms, disorientation, inability to process sensory input, eventually catatonia. Naira stepped closer to the monitor, studying. The affected neural patterns. These structures, she said slowly, they're precisely what I lack. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. You mean, Director Kelvin began. The pathogen is attacking exactly what makes me different, Naira confirmed, a chill running through her. The specialized neural structures that facilitate telepathic transmission. I never developed them. Which means you would be immune, Elijah concluded, understanding dawning on his face. A communication alert sounded, and the stern face of Imperial Sovereign Varan appeared on the main screen. Vexar Station, the Sovereign began, his voice grave. The situation has escalated beyond our ability to contain. Central Medical Command requests the immediate return of Ambassador Nira to the homeworld. Her condition may provide critical insight into combating this pathogen. Naira stepped forward into view of the transmission. Sovereign. The Imperial leader's expression remained impassive, but Naira noticed a subtle change in his skin patterns, a flicker of what might have been regret. Your unique neural configuration may be the key to understanding this pathogen, Ambassador. You are needed. After the transmission ended, Naira turned to Elijah, her skin showing complex patterns of anxiety and determination. I must return to Vexar Prime, she said. Then, hesitating slightly, she added, I would ask that you accompany me as a scientific advisor. Your expertise in comparative neurology could be valuable. What remained unspoken but clear between them was that she was asking not just for his scientific expertise, but for an ally, someone who saw her value when her own people had not. Elijah nodded without hesitation. Of course, we'll figure this out together. As they prepared for emergency transport to Vexar Prime, Nira felt an unfamiliar sensation stirring within her. Hope. For the first time in her life, being different might not be a curse, but the very thing that could save her people. And having Elijah by her side, a human who understood isolation and connection in ways her own people never could, gave her a strength she had never known before. The irony wasn't lost on her. The outcast might become the savior, with a member of a primitive species as her only true ally in a galaxy that had rejected her from birth. Defiance and redemption. The Imperial vessel cut through hyperspace, its quantum drives propelling them toward Vexar Prime with unprecedented urgency. In the ship's medical bay, Naira sat perfectly still as Elijah carefully collected another tissue sample from the base of her skull, where the specialized neural structures should have developed. The infection has spread to 23 major population centers, she said, reviewing the latest reports on her datapad. Millions affected, and the numbers are growing exponentially. Elijah studied the sample under a molecular scanner. These antibodies in your system are fascinating, he said, his voice tense with concentration. It's almost as if your body evolved specifically to counter this exact neural pathogen. Not evolved, Naira corrected, her skin darkening to a troubled indigo. Engineered, Elijah looked up sharply. What do you mean? The patterns on Naira's skin shifted to complex swirls of deep blue and violet, emotions too nuanced for simple, verbal language. I've suspected for some time that my condition wasn't natural. The Imperial bloodline has produced exceptionally powerful telepaths for generations. The probability of someone like me occurring spontaneously is statistically negligible. You think someone deliberately altered your neural development? Elijah asked, setting down his instruments. I believe I was part of a preventative measure, Naira said, her voice barely above a whisper. A safeguard created by someone who foresaw this possibility. Before Elijah could respond, the ship's communication system activated. Ambassador, Dr. Carter, came the captain's voice. We're approaching Vexar Prime. The Imperial Medical Council awaits your arrival. Vexar Prime's crystalline cities had always pulsed with the synchronized rhythm of collective consciousness, their structures, responding to the harmonious thoughts of millions. Now, as Naira and Elijah were escorted from the landing platform to the Imperial Medical Center, they witnessed a world falling into disarray. The crystal spires fluctuated erratically, their colors shifting unpredictably as the telepathic network that controlled them degraded. In the streets below, Vexari moved with uncharacteristic individuality, some wandering aimlessly, others gathered in confused groups, attempting verbal communication with varying success. For beings who had relied on telepathy since birth, the sudden isolation was more than disorienting. It was existentially terrifying. "It's worse than the reports indicated," Naira murmured, as their transport glided through the capital. "The collective is fragmenting." Elijah's face was grim. "Without their telepathic connection, they don't know how to function as individuals." "Something we have in common," Naira replied with a bitter smile. "They're experiencing what I've lived with my entire life." The Imperial Medical Center dominated the Central District, a massive structure of living crystal and bioengineered tissue that normally pulsed with the collective knowledge of Vexari medical science. Now it flickered erratically, sections darkening as the neural interfaces controlling them failed. They were met by Chief Medical Officer Sovan, his silver-flecked skin dull with fatigue and stress. "Ambassador Naira, Dr. Carter," he said aloud. His verbal communication stilted from lack of practice. "The Sovereign awaits in the central laboratory." Imperial Sovereign Varan stood surrounded by medical equipment and displays showing the spread of the neural pathogen across planetary systems. His normally commanding presence seemed diminished, his skin patterns showing uncharacteristic uncertainty. "Ambassador," he acknowledged Naira with a formal bow, then turned to Elijah. "Dr. Carter, your presence is unexpected, but potentially valuable. We understand humans have extensive experience with individual neural function. We've had to develop sophisticated ways of connecting without telepathy," Elijah confirmed, his tone respectful but direct. "Our research into neural disorders may provide insights relevant to your current crisis." Sovereign Varan studied him with new interest before returning his attention to Naira. "Ambassador, we require comprehensive analysis of your neural structure. The absence of telepathic capabilities that once marked you as different may now hold the key to our survival." "I understand, Sovereign," Naira replied evenly. "But before I submit to your examinations, I need to know the truth. Was my condition engineered?" A hush fell over the laboratory. Sovereign Varan's skin patterns froze momentarily before shifting to a deep, regretful blue. "How did you know?" "Probability analysis," Naira said, "and the convenient timing of my existence just prior to a pathogen that targets exactly what I lack." Varan sighed, an unusual gesture for a Vexari. "It was your mother, Imperial geneticist Tella. She discovered evidence of an engineered bioweapon targeting our telepathic structures nearly 30 cycles ago. The High Council dismissed her concerns as paranoid fantasy. So she created me as living proof," Naira concluded, pieces falling into place. "A Vexari who could survive without telepathy, a template for adaptation if the threat ever materialized." "She altered your embryonic neural development in secret," Varan confirmed. "When discovered, she was sentenced to exile. The Council decided to allow you to live, but to ensure I remained isolated," Naira finished. "An embarrassment hidden in diplomatic postings far from the homeworld." Elijah stepped forward. "You treated her as defective when she was actually your species' insurance policy, and now you need her to save you." The directness of his statement, so typically human, silenced the room. Varan's skin rippled with complex emotions before settling into a pattern of acceptance. "You are correct, Dr. Carter. We were wrong." The following days blurred into an exhausting routine of tests, analyses, and experimental treatments. Naira's unique neural configuration provided the template for a potential cure, while Elijah's expertise in non-telepathic neural function offered crucial insights into how the Vexari might adapt to temporary isolation. In the research laboratory, tensions mounted as the pathogen continued to spread. The Imperial Council, most of them now affected by the early stages of neural degradation, demanded faster results. "This is impossible," senior researcher Moran declared, frustration evident in both his voice and skin patterns. "Ambassador Naira's neural adaptations took place during embryonic development. We cannot replicate that process in fully formed adults. Then we need to approach this differently, Elijah said, studying the latest simulation results. Instead of trying to make them like Naira, what if we create a temporary neural shield? Something that protects the telepathic structures until the pathogen runs its course. Based on what? Marin demanded. Based on the antibodies in Naira's system, Elijah explained, calling up molecular models on the display. They're not attacking the pathogen directly. They're protecting the surrounding neural tissue from damage. If we can synthesize and distribute these specific antibodies, the breakthrough came 3 days later, after countless failed experiments and simulations. Elijah, working through the night while Naira finally succumbed to exhaustion, identified a specific protein sequence in her immune system that could be adapted into a preventative treatment. It won't cure those already severely affected, he explained to the Imperial Medical Council as Naira translated his more complex medical terminology. But it should protect healthy individuals and stabilize those in early stages. How quickly? Can it be synthesized? Demanded Counselor Zevix, who had been among Naira's most vocal critics before the crisis. With your biotechnology, mass production could begin within hours, Elijah said. Distribution is your bigger challenge given the breakdown in your normal communication and transportation networks. We'll manage, Sovereign Varan said. Prepare your formula for synthesis. As the meeting concluded, Counselor Zevix approached Naira, his discomfort with verbal communication evident. Ambassador, I must acknowledge that my previous assessment of your condition was incorrect. Incorrect? Elijah interjected before Naira could respond. You treated her as damaged when she was your salvation. You isolated her, diminished her, made her feel like a failure when she was perfectly adapted to survive exactly this threat. Elijah, Naira said softly, touching his arm. It's all right. It's not all right, he insisted, his anger surprising even himself. Your entire civilization prides itself on connection, on unity. Yet you cast out the one person who was different. Do you have any idea what that did to her? How much strength it took for her to develop her own identity in a society that values only conformity? The room had gone silent, all eyes on the human who dared challenge their fundamental beliefs. Even Naira seemed taken aback by his vehemence. On Earth, we've learned, often the hard way, that diversity isn't weakness, it's survival, it's evolution. Different perspectives, different abilities, different ways of thinking. That's how we've overcome every challenge our species has faced. Elijah's voice softened, but his intensity remained. Naira isn't defective. She's the next step in your evolution, proof that your species can adapt and survive even without telepathy. Sovereign Varan stepped forward, his skin pattern showing thoughtful consideration. Your passion speaks well of humanity, Dr. Carter. And perhaps there is wisdom in your words that we have been too connected to perceive. As the treatment was synthesized and distribution began, Naira found Elijah in an observation dome overlooking the capital city. The chaotic patterns of light that had characterized the crisis were beginning to stabilize as the treatment took effect. You didn't have to defend me like that, she said, standing beside him. Yes, I did, he replied simply. Someone needed to say it. No one has ever stood up for me before, Naira admitted, her skin glowing with a warm gold hue he had never seen before. In all my life I've been a problem to be managed, never a person to be defended. Elijah turned to face her. Where I come from, being different isn't always easy, but it's recognized as valuable. The outsiders, the divergent thinkers, they're often the ones who change everything. Like you, she asked with newfound boldness. Like us, he corrected. A human who left his world to understand aliens and an alien who never quite fit among her own kind. Maybe we're both exactly where we need to be. 3 weeks later, the crisis had largely abated. The pathogen had run its course, and while the telepathic network was temporarily weakened, the Vexari had adapted with surprising resilience. Necessity had forced them to develop verbal and nonverbal communication skills, creating new neural pathways that would ultimately strengthen their species. In the Imperial Council chamber, Sovereign Varan addressed the assembled officials and the billions watching via neural broadcast across the empire. This crisis has taught us that our greatest strength, our collective consciousness, was also our greatest vulnerability. Through the foresight of imperial geneticist Tella, the resilience of Ambassador Naira, and the insights of Dr. Elijah Carter, we have not merely survived but evolved. He gestured for Naira to join him on the central platform. Ambassador Naira, once considered divergent, has proven to be pivotal to our survival. Her unique neural structure, once viewed as a deficiency, represents an evolutionary adaptation that may secure our future. Naira stood tall, her skin glowing with confident patterns as she addressed her people. My entire life, I have existed outside the collective consciousness that defines Vexari identity. I have known isolation that, until recently, none of you could comprehend. Yet in that isolation, I discovered strengths you could not imagine. The ability to form connections without telepathy, to develop individual thought patterns, to see possibilities outside consensus. She glanced at Elijah, drawing strength from his presence. Humans have thrived without telepathy, building complex civilizations through alternative forms of connection. During this crisis, many of you experienced for the first time what it means to be truly individual, and discovered within yourselves capabilities you never knew existed. Therefore, Sovereign Varan continued, the Imperial Council has established a new initiative, the Neural Diversity Program. Under Ambassador Naira's leadership, we will study and cultivate greater neural variation within our population, ensuring that our species never again faces extinction from a single threat. The implications were clear. Naira was no longer an outcast, but a visionary, her once stigmatized condition now recognized as valuable adaptation. The very difference that had marked her for isolation had become the foundation for a new understanding of Vexari potential. Later, in a quiet garden overlooking the gradually recovering city, Naira found Elijah preparing for his return to Earth. So, she said, Earth's scientific envoy completes his mission with unprecedented success. Your people will be pleased. The mission evolved beyond anyone's expectations, Elijah replied with a smile. Including mine. What will you tell them about us? Naira asked. About the Vexari? Elijah considered this. That you're more like us than either of our species realized. That connection takes many forms. That diversity, true diversity, even at the neural level, is the key to survival. And about me? She asked, her skin patterns betraying vulnerability beneath her new confidence. That. I met someone extraordinary, he said simply. Someone who taught me what real strength looks like. Naira's skin glowed with patterns of gold and rose, emotions she had never expressed before. The Neural Diversity Program will require ongoing collaboration with Earth scientists, she said. As its director, I'll need a permanent human liaison. Are you offering me a job, Ambassador? Elijah asked with a raised eyebrow. I'm offering you a partnership, she corrected, between two people who understand what it means to bridge worlds. As the twin suns of Vexar Prime set behind the crystalline spires, casting rainbow patterns across the recovering city, a human and a Vexari stood together, proof that sometimes the greatest connections form not through telepathy or shared neural patterns, but through the simple recognition of another's worth. The galaxy had rejected her, but a human had become her defender. And together, they had changed everything.